Can you imagine the shockwave that would ripple through the NHL if Sidney Crosby, the face of Pittsburgh hockey for nearly 2 decades, actually packed his bags and left the Steel City? It's a question that's been buzzing around hockey circles like a relentless power play. And honestly, it's the kind of scenario that makes your heart race with equal parts excitement and disbelief. We're talking about a player who IS Pittsburgh, who's bled black and gold since 2005, suddenly wearing the blue-blanc rouge of the Montreal Canadiens. Sounds crazy, right? Well, buckle up, because we're diving deep into this wild possibility that refuses to die, despite all logic screaming otherwise. Let's get the facts straight first. Just 1 year ago, Sidney Crosby put pen to paper on a contract extension that keeps him in Pittsburgh to the 2026-27 season. The 38-year-old captain committed to the Penguins when he could have easily tested the waters or kept his options open. That should have been the end of the story, right? Case closed. Sid stays in Pittsburgh. Everyone goes home happy. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite that fresh ink on his contract, Crosby's name keeps popping up in trade rumors and speculation, particularly linking him to Montreal. It's like that song you can't get out of your head. Annoying, persistent, and somehow still captivating. Frank Seravalli from Bleacher Report recently threw gasoline on this fire by outlining exactly what it would take for this blockbuster move to actually happen. According to Seravalli, speaking on Sportsnet's Big Show with Ruzick and Rose, there are 2 critical conditions that would need to align perfectly. First, and this is absolutely crucial, the decision would have to come entirely from Crosby himself. The Penguins organization isn't going to tap him on the shoulder and ask if he'd like to explore other opportunities. That's just not how you treat a living legend who's brought you 3 Stanley Cups and defined an entire generation of your franchise. Crosby would need to walk into the front office and explicitly request a trade, something that seems about as likely as a penguin flying. The second condition, the destination would need be extraordinarily special. We're not talking about just any contender or any team with cap space. It would have to be a situation so perfect, so compelling, that it would justify uprooting nearly 20 years of history, chemistry, and legacy. That's a monumentally high bar to clear. So why does Montreal keep coming up in these conversations? It's not just random speculation pulled out of thin air. There's actually some legitimate reasoning behind the fantasy. Crosby has deep personal ties to the province of Quebec. He's a Nova Scotia native who grew up idolizing the Canadiens and speaking French. The romantic narrative practically writes itself. Hockey's greatest player of this generation returning to his roots, donning the most storied jersey in the sport, and leading a resurgent Canadiens team back to glory. And let's be real, Montreal IS on the upswing. Under head coach Martin St. Louis, the Canadiens have been steadily improving, developing young talent, and building something genuinely exciting. For a competitor like Crosby, who's watched Pittsburgh struggle to maintain their championship window, the allure of joining a team on a rise rather than one potentially declining could theoretically hold some appeal. But here's where reality crashes the party, like an unwelcome guest. The logistics of this move are absolutely nightmarish. Crosby's contract runs through 2027 and includes significant signing bonuses. Any trade will require not just his approval, remember that no movement clause, but also the receiving team's ability to fit his cap hit into their salary structure. Montreal would need to perform some serious financial gymnastics to make the numbers work, likely involving multiple moves and potentially sacrificing key pieces of their young core. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Sidney Crosby has never, not once, given any indication that he wants to leave Pittsburgh. In fact, he's done the exact opposite repeatedly throughout his career. Every time his contract has come up for renewal, he's re-signed. Every time reporters have asked about his future, he's reaffirmed his commitment to the Penguins. This isn't a player who's been dropping hints or expressing frustration. This is a player who seems genuinely content exactly where he is. From a pure hockey standpoint, a move also makes little sense at this stage of his career. Crosby operates within a system meticulously crafted by head coach Dan Muse that maximizes his strengths. He's playing first-line center in an environment where every detail, from forechecking patterns to neutral zone support to offensive zone cycles, has been developed specifically around his skill set. His chemistry with line mates Ricard Raquel and Brian Rust is the product of countless hours of ice time together. You can't just replicate that overnight in a new city with new teammates and a different system. Think about what it would actually mean for Crosby to start over somewhere else. He'd need to learn new systems, build chemistry with unfamiliar line mates, adapt to a different coaching philosophy, and do all of this while being 38 years old and in the twilight of his career. Why would someone who's been so successful doing things one way suddenly want to blow it all up and start from scratch? From the Penguins side of things, trading Crosby would be organizational suicide. This isn't just about hockey. It's about identity, legacy, and business. Crosby is the Pittsburgh Penguins in the modern era. He's brought 3 Stanley Cups to the city, revitalized the franchise, and become one of the most beloved athletes in Pittsburgh sports history. The backlash from trading him would be absolutely catastrophic, beyond emotional and public relations nightmare. There's a practical reality that Pittsburgh is still competitive. They're not in full rebuild mode. They're not tanking for draft picks, and they haven't given up on contending. Crosby remains productive. The team still makes the playoffs, and the organization continues to surround him with talent. Why would management voluntarily tear down what they've spent 2 decades building? The Penguins front office understands what they have in Crosby, not just as a player, but as a leader, mentor, and franchise cornerstone. His presence in the locker room, his work ethic, and his influence on younger players are invaluable. You don't trade that away unless you absolutely have to, and right now, there's zero indication that Pittsburgh has to do anything of the sort. Look, I get it. Hockey fans love to dream about blockbuster trades and shocking moves. The idea of Sidney Crosby in a Montreal Canadiens jersey is tantalizing, dramatic, and would dominate sports headlines for months. But let's be honest with ourselves. This isn't happening. The stars would need to align in ways that seem virtually impossible. Crosby would need to suddenly decide he wants out of Pittsburgh after showing zero inclination to leave. Montreal would need to somehow make the cap space work without gutting their roster. Pittsburgh would need to agree to trade their franchise icon. And all of this would need to happen in a way that actually makes hockey sense for everyone involved. The probability of all these factors coming together? Somewhere between slim and none. Frank Seravalli is absolutely right when he says this scenario would require something really special. The problem is that really special in this context means borderline miraculous. Crosby has built his entire career in Pittsburgh. He's comfortable, successful, and still competing at an elite level, unless something dramatically changes. And I mean dramatically, number 87 will retire as a Penguin, and that's exactly how it should be. The Sidney Crosby to Montreal rumors are fun to talk about. They generate clicks and debates, but they're ultimately just noise. Sometimes in sports, loyalty and legacy actually mean something. Sometimes a player and a city are simply meant to be together. This is one of those times. Crosby will finish his career where he started it, and hockey will be better for it. What do you think? Could you ever see Sid in another uniform, or is he Pittsburgh for life? Drop your thoughts in comments below. And don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of hockey's most persistent rumors.